Benjamin Barlow stood at the edge of his wheat field, staring at the letter in his hands as the March wind tried to tear it away. The official government seal mocking him with every gust that threatened to send the parchment flying into the mud. The Homestead law was clear. If he did not have a wife by the first day of spring, his claim would be forfeit. The 200 acres he had broken his back cultivating for 3 years would be seized and auctioned off to someone who fit the government's definition of a proper settler. He had thought he would have more time, had believed that the pretty schoolteacher in the nearest town might eventually say yes to his clumsy proposals. But she had married the blacksmith last autumn, and Benjamin had run out of options in a territory where unmarried women were scarcer than gold. The farm sat on the edge of the frontier, 10 miles from the nearest settlement, surrounded by forests that still sheltered creatures most folks feared to name aloud. Benjamin had chosen this isolation deliberately after his service in the border wars, wanting distance from the noise and chaos of civilization. But now, that very isolation threatened to cost him everything. Spring arrived in less than 2 weeks. He had posted advertisements in 3 towns, had even written to mail-order bride agencies back east, but responses took months, and he had days. He crumpled the letter and shoved it into his coat pocket, turning back toward the log house he had built with his own hands. The structure was solid, the roof tight, the windows glazed with real glass he had hauled all the way from the territorial capital. He had dug a good well, cleared fields, planted orchards, and built a barn that could house twice the livestock he currently owned. Everything was ready for a future that might never arrive. The sun was setting when he heard the sound at his gate. Not a knock exactly, but a deliberate rattling of the wooden bars that formed the entrance to his property. Benjamin grabbed the rifle that he kept by the door, a habit from his military days that had never quite left him, and approached cautiously. Raiders sometimes ventured this far west, and there were worse things than raiders in the deep woods. What he saw made him stop dead in his tracks. An orc woman stood on the other side of his gate, her green skin almost luminous in the fading light, her dark hair braided in an intricate pattern that fell past her broad shoulders. She wore traveling clothes that had seen hard use, a pack slung across her back, and her hands gripped the wooden bars with a white-knuckled intensity that suggested she had been standing there for some time working up her courage. Small tusks protruded from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears twitched as she registered his approach. "I seek the human who needs a wife," she said, her voice steady despite the fear he could see in her amber eyes. "I was told in the last town that Benjamin Barlow of the Western Homesteads has no bride." Benjamin felt his mouth go dry. An orc. She was offering herself to him as a bride. The prejudices he had grown up with, the propaganda from the war years, all of it surged up in an instinctive wave of suspicion and unease. But beneath that, desperately fighting its way to the surface, was the reality of his situation. He had 12 days. "Who told you that?" he asked, not lowering the rifle but not raising it either. "The clerk at the land office," she replied, her gaze dropping to the weapon in his hands. "I overheard him discussing your situation with another man. He said you would lose your farm. I thought perhaps we could help each other." And why would an orc woman need to marry a human farmer? The question came out harsher than he intended, but she did not flinch. "Because my clan cast me out for refusing to participate in a raid on a human settlement," she said quietly. "I am dead to them now. I cannot return to orc lands, and I cannot survive alone in the wild forever. I need a home. You need a wife to satisfy the law. It could be a practical arrangement, nothing more." Benjamin studied her face, looking for deception, but found only exhaustion and a desperate hope that mirrored his own feelings. She was taking an enormous risk coming here. Humans killed orcs on sight in some parts of the territory. Even here on the frontier, where people tended to be more practical, an orc woman traveling alone was putting her life in constant danger. He made a decision that probably would have horrified his former commanding officers. "What is your name?" "Varra Halgrim," she said, and something in her posture relaxed slightly, as though giving her name had sealed some kind of pact between them. "I am Benjamin Barlow, but I suppose you already knew that." He lowered the rifle and unlatched the gate. "Come inside. You look half frozen, and I imagine you have not eaten properly in days." The gratitude that flashed across her face made something twist in his chest. She followed him to the house, moving with the careful alertness of someone accustomed to expecting attacks from any direction. Inside, he gestured for her to sit at the rough-hewn table while he stirred up the fire and pulled out the remains of the stew he had made that morning. She ate slowly, deliberately, as though afraid that eating too quickly would reveal the depths of her hunger. "How long have you been traveling?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "3 weeks since my clan exiled me. I have been moving west, trying to stay ahead of the winter storms and away from settlements where I might be shot on sight." She met his eyes. "I will not lie to you, Benjamin Barlow. I am desperate. But I am also strong, I can work, and I will not bring trouble to your door if I can help it. If you agree to this arrangement, I will be a proper wife in name and in the eyes of the law. What happens beyond that can be decided with time." He should have felt trapped, pressured, but instead he felt something like relief spreading through his chest. Here was someone as desperate as himself, someone who understood that this marriage would be a matter of survival before it could be anything else. No false romance, no pretense of love, just two people trying to hold onto their futures by whatever means available. "The law requires a ceremony within the territory, witnessed by at least 2 citizens," he said slowly, thinking through the logistics. "The nearest settlement with a proper official is 2 days' ride from here. We would have to leave tomorrow to make it in time, get the paperwork filed before the spring deadline." "I can ride," Varra said quickly, "or I can run alongside if you only have 1 horse." "I have 2 horses. One is getting old, but he is steady enough for a journey like this." Benjamin rubbed his face, feeling the stubble rasp under his palm. "You understand what you are agreeing to. Life on a frontier farm is hard work. The winters are brutal, the growing season is short, and we are far from any help if something goes wrong. And there will be people in town who will not like seeing an orc woman married to a human man. There may be trouble." "I am accustomed to trouble," Varra said quietly. "And I am accustomed to hard work. If you can offer me a place to belong, I will give you my loyalty and my labor. That is the bargain I propose." Benjamin extended his hand across the table. "Then we have a deal, Varra Halgrim." Her hand was warm and calloused when she gripped his, her strength evident even in that brief contact. They shook on it like business partners sealing a contract, and perhaps that was exactly what they were. They left at first light, riding east toward the settlement of Millbrook. Varra sat astride the older gelding with the easy confidence of someone who had spent time on horseback, though she admitted that orc clans typically traveled on foot unless raiding. She had learned to ride from a human prisoner her clan had captured years ago, before he had been ransomed back to his people. "Did you ever participate in raids before the one you refused?" Benjamin asked as they followed the rutted trail through the forest. "Yes," she said simply, and did not elaborate. The admission hung between them like a stone wall. He thought about the men he had killed during the border wars, the orc settlements he had helped burn when following orders from officers who saw all orcs as vermin to be exterminated. His hands were not clean either. "What made you refuse the last one?" It was a farming village. I watched them for 3 days before the raid while we scouted their defenses. There was a woman with 2 small children. She sang to them every night before they slept. Varra's voice was carefully neutral. I kept thinking about how she would sound when she screamed, and I realized I did not want to know. I did not want to be the one to make her scream. So when the raid began, I stayed back. I let families escape. My clan discovered my betrayal, and the chieftain declared me kinslayer and exile. It is the worst thing an orc can be called. Benjamin absorbed this, trying to reconcile the image of the warrior who had participated in raids with the woman who had refused to murder children. People were complicated. He had learned that in the war, though his commanders had tried to convince him otherwise. For what it is worth, I think you did the right thing. She turned to look at him, surprise evident on her face. You do not hate me for what I was. I was a soldier. I killed orcs when I was ordered to, burned orc villages when commanded. I cannot hate you for your past when mine is just as bloody. He kept his eyes on the trail ahead. Maybe we both deserve a chance to be something other than what the war made us. They rode in silence for a while after that, but it felt less hostile, more contemplative. That night, they made camp in a clearing, and Benjamin showed Varra how he preferred his coffee prepared, while she shared strips of dried meat from her pack that had been seasoned with herbs he did not recognize. The flavor was strange but not unpleasant, and he found himself asking about orc cooking methods, which led to her asking about human farming techniques, and before he realized it, they had been talking for hours. You really built that entire farm yourself? Varra asked, poking at the fire with a stick. Most of it. I hired help for the barn raising, but everything else I did on my own. It was good having work that built something instead of tearing things down. He sipped his coffee. What did you do in your clan before? I was a scout and a hunter. I tracked game, found water sources, mapped terrain. I was good at it. There was pride in her voice and sadness. I thought I would eventually become a hunt leader, maybe even earn a seat on the clan council. Now I will never know. You could scout and hunt on the farm, Benjamin offered. The woods around my property are full of deer and wild turkey. I have been meaning to set up proper hunting routes, but I have been too busy with the planting and harvesting. If you know how to track and hunt, that would be incredibly useful. Her eyes lit up with an emotion he could not quite name. You would trust me with that. Why would I not? You just told me you are good at it. I would be a fool not to take advantage of your skills. He frowned. Did you think I would expect you to just stay in the house and cook? I did not know what you would expect, she admitted. Human men in the villages I have seen seem to keep their women very close, very controlled. I thought perhaps that was how all human marriages worked. Some do, I suppose. But I never saw the point in marrying someone and then treating them like property. My parents worked their farm together, each doing what they were best at. It seemed to work well for them. He shrugged. I figure we can do the same. You do what you are good at, I do what I am good at, and between us we keep the farm running. Varra smiled then, a real smile that showed her tusks and crinkled the corners of her eyes. I think I am going to like being married to you, Benjamin Barlow. He felt his face heat and was grateful for the darkness that hid his blush. We are not married yet. Do not count your chickens before they hatch. What do chickens have to do with marriage? It is an expression. It means do not assume something will happen before it actually does. Humans have very strange expressions. Orcs probably have equally strange ones, I just do not know them yet. Give me time, she said with a grin. I will teach you all the best orc sayings. Like do not sharpen your blade before the enemy is sighted, which means essentially the same thing as your chicken expression. That actually makes more sense than the chicken one, Benjamin admitted, and they both laughed. They reached Millbrook late the following afternoon, and the stares began the moment they rode down the main street. Benjamin kept his posture relaxed but alert, watching for signs of actual danger beyond simple curiosity. Varra rode beside him with her head high, refusing to show fear even though he could see the tension in her shoulders. The land office was a small building at the end of the street, and the clerk who had gossiped about Benjamin's situation looked like he might faint when they walked through the door together. "Mr. Barlow," the clerk stammered, "I see you have found a solution to your bride situation." "This is Varra Halgrim. We are here to file for a marriage license and complete the ceremony before the spring deadline." Benjamin placed his homestead papers on the counter. "I believe everything is in order." The clerk's hands shook slightly as he shuffled through the papers. "Sir, I must inform you that while there is no law specifically forbidding marriage between humans and orcs, there may be social complications. Are you refusing to process the paperwork?" Benjamin asked, his voice cold in a way that made the clerk step back. No, of course not. I simply wanted to ensure you understood. We understand perfectly. Please process the license." It took an hour of bureaucratic tedium, but eventually they had the signed license and an appointment with the territorial judge who could perform marriages. The judge was an elderly woman named Harriet Bryce, who had seen everything the frontier could throw at her and seemed unimpressed by the sight of an orc bride. "You are both here of your own free will?" she asked, looking between them with sharp eyes. "Yes, Your Honor," they said in unison. "No coercion, no payment exchanged. This is a legitimate marriage you both wish to enter into." "Yes, Your Honor," Benjamin repeated. Beside him, Varra nodded firmly. Judge Bryce produced a worn book and flipped it open to a marked page. "Then let us proceed. Do you, Benjamin Barlow, take this woman Varra Halgrim to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death parts you?" Benjamin looked at Varra, at the woman who had appeared at his gate offering salvation in exchange for a home, and felt the weight of the commitment he was making. This was real. This was permanent. "I do." "Do you, Varra Halgrim, take this man Benjamin Barlow to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death parts you?" Varra's voice was steady. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territorial government, I declare you husband and wife. Mr. Barlow, you may kiss your bride if you wish, though it is not required for the legality of the marriage." Benjamin had not thought this far ahead. He glanced at Varra, who looked equally uncertain, and settled for gently pressing his lips to her forehead. It seemed safer, less presumptuous, and when he pulled back he saw relief in her eyes that suggested she had been worried he would demand more. They signed the marriage certificate. The judge filed the paperwork, and just like that, Benjamin Barlow had a wife and his farm was safe. They spent that night at the town's only boarding house, and the owner grudgingly gave them a room, though his expression suggested he found their presence distasteful. Benjamin offered to take the floor, but Varra pointed out that the bed was large enough for both of them if they stayed on opposite sides, and it seemed wasteful for one of them to wake up with a sore back. He lay awake for a long time, listening to her breathing on the other side of the mattress, trying to process the fact that he was married now. Married to an orc woman he had met 3 days ago. It should have felt wrong or strange, but instead it just felt like a problem solved, a weight lifted. He had his farm. She had a home. Everything else could be figured out as they went. The ride back to the homestead took another 2 days, and they fell into an easy rhythm of travel, making camp and sharing stories about their vastly different childhoods. Benjamin told her about growing up as the youngest of 5 children on a farm in the Eastern Territories, about joining the military because there were no prospects for a youngest son, about the horrors of war and the desperate desire for peace that had driven him west. Varra spoke of life in an orc clan, the constant emphasis on strength and aggression, the way she had never quite fit the mold of what an orc warrior was supposed to be. "I always asked too many questions," she admitted as they rode through a river valley. "Why do we raid this village and not that one? Why do we kill humans who have not attacked us? Why do we take prisoners only to ransom them when we could treat them as guests and build alliances? The elders said I thought too much like prey, not enough like a predator." "Asking questions is not a weakness," Benjamin said. "It is how you figure out what is right and what is wrong. Tell that to my former clan." "I would, but I suspect they would not listen." She laughed at that, the sound bright and unexpected. When they finally arrived back at the farm, Benjamin felt an odd sense of homecoming that was different from all the other times he had returned from trips to town. This time he was not coming home alone. Varra dismounted and stood looking at the property with an expression he could not quite read. "This is really mine now too?" she asked quietly. "I am allowed to be here. You are my wife. This is your home as much as it is mine." He unsaddled the horses and led them to the barn. "Come on, let me show you around properly. You were only here for a few hours before we left." He gave her the full tour, showing her the fields he had planted, the orchard of young apple trees that would not bear fruit for another few years, the chicken coop, and the small herd of sheep in the far pasture. She asked intelligent questions about crop rotation and irrigation, and he found himself impressed by how quickly she grasped farming concepts that had taken him months to learn. "I will need to teach you how to milk the cow," he said as they walked back toward the house. "And how to make cheese and butter. It is tedious work but necessary." "I can learn tedious. What I really want you to show me is how you decided where to place your fields. The positioning seems very deliberate." They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing agricultural strategy, and Benjamin realized with some surprise that he was genuinely enjoying himself. Varra was smart, she listened well, and she offered suggestions that came from her experience tracking game through wilderness. She pointed out that one of his fields was positioned directly in a deer path, which explained why he had been losing so many young plants to browsing, and suggested moving the field slightly east where the terrain would naturally funnel the deer away. As the sun set, they worked together to prepare dinner, and Benjamin was struck by how comfortable it felt to share his space with another person. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself he preferred the solitude, but having Varra moving around his kitchen felt right in a way he had not anticipated. "Where should I sleep?" she asked after they had cleaned up from the meal. "I do not want to presume." Benjamin had been thinking about this question during the entire ride home. "There is a bed upstairs in the loft. I have been sleeping there because it is warmer in winter. But I can move down to the main room if you want the loft, or we can continue sharing like we did at the boarding house." "Whatever makes you comfortable." Varra bit her lip, a gesture that made her look younger and more vulnerable. "I feel safe with you, Benjamin. I do not know if that makes sense, given we barely know each other, but I do. I do not mind sharing the bed if you are comfortable with it. But I want you to know that I am not ready for marital relations. Not yet, perhaps not for a long time." "I am not expecting that," he said quickly, feeling his face heat again. "This marriage is for practical reasons. Everything else can wait until we both want it if we ever do." "I will not pressure you, Varra. You have my word." The relief on her face was palpable. "Thank you. I was worried you would feel you had the right to demand it because of the marriage. You are a person, not property. You have the right to say no to me about anything, always." He met her eyes. "I mean that. If I ever do something that makes you uncomfortable, tell me and I will stop." She nodded slowly. "The same goes for you. If I overstep or make you uncomfortable, I want you to tell me." They shook hands on it again, sealing another agreement, and Benjamin found himself thinking that marriage to Varra Hallgrim might turn out to be the best decision he had ever made. The weeks that followed established a routine that worked for both of them. Benjamin handled the majority of the planting and field work, while Varra took over the hunting and began scouting the surrounding forest, mapping the game trails and water sources. She brought home deer and turkey with impressive regularity, and taught Benjamin how to prepare the meat using orc preservation techniques that made it last longer than his methods. In exchange, he taught her how to bake bread and churn butter, and tried not to laugh when she got flour absolutely everywhere during her first attempt at making biscuits. "These taste like rocks," she declared, glaring at the misshapen lumps on the plate. "They are not that bad," Benjamin lied, biting into one and immediately regretting it. "Okay, they are pretty terrible, but you will get better with practice. My first loaf of bread came out so hard I considered using it as a weapon. At least it would have been useful for something." They fell into an easy companionship, working side by side during the day and talking late into the night before falling asleep in their shared bed with a careful distance maintained between them. Benjamin found himself watching her sometimes, noticing the way the firelight caught in her dark hair, the strength in her hands when she worked, the rare smiles that transformed her whole face. He was attracted to her. He could admit that to himself, but he kept his word and made no advances. This was a partnership first, and anything else would have to develop naturally. About a month after the wedding, Benjamin was working in the barn when he heard shouting from the direction of the road. He grabbed his rifle and ran outside to find 3 men on horseback at his gate, and Varra standing between them and the house with her hunting bow drawn and an arrow nocked. "Get out of here," one of the men was yelling. "We do not tolerate your kind in this territory. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." "This is my home," Varra said, her voice cold and steady. "I am married to the man who owns this land. I have every legal right to be here." "Married?" The man spat on the ground. "Barlow married a monster. That cannot be legal." Benjamin arrived at the gate, rifle raised. "It is legal. It has been filed with the territorial government, and you are trespassing on my property. I suggest you leave before I decide to exercise my right to defend my land." The 3 men turned to stare at him, and Benjamin recognized one of them as a farmer from near Millbrook, someone he had traded with a few times. "Barlow, what are you thinking? You married an orc. I married my wife, and how I manage my personal affairs is none of your concern." He kept the rifle steady. "You have 30 seconds to get off my land. The Territorial Council should hear about this. It is not right, a human and an orc. It goes against nature. 20 seconds. The men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. Finally, the leader jerked his horse's head around. "This is not over, Barlow. People need to know what you have done." They rode off, and Benjamin lowered the rifle only when they were out of sight. He turned to find Varra still standing with her bow drawn, her whole body trembling with suppressed adrenaline. "You can lower the bow," he said gently. "They are gone." She lowered the weapon slowly, then looked at him with wide eyes. "You defended me. You told them I was your wife." "You are my wife. What else would I say?" He frowned. "Did you think I would not defend you? I thought you might decide I was more trouble than I am worth." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought you might ask me to leave to avoid problems with your neighbors." Benjamin felt something crack open in his chest. He set down the rifle and closed the distance between them, gently taking the bow from her shaking hands. "Varra, Listen to me. I do not care what those men think. I do not care if every person in Millbrook decides to shun me. You are my wife. This is your home, and I will defend both of those facts with my life if necessary. You understand, she nodded. And then suddenly she was crying, great shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. Benjamin did the only thing he could think of, and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she wept against his chest. She clutched at his shirt like a drowning person holding onto a rope, and he just stood there and let her cry, one hand stroking her back in what he hoped was a comforting gesture. I am sorry, she gasped eventually, pulling back and wiping at her face. I should not have broken down like that. It was weak. It was not weak, it was human, he paused. Well, you know what I mean, it was understandable, you have been through a lot, so have you, and you do not fall apart. I cried for 3 days straight after my first battle, Benjamin admitted. And I had nightmares for years afterward. Everyone breaks sometimes, Varra. It does not make you weak, it makes you someone who feels things. She looked up at him with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and wondering, and he felt the distance between them shift in some fundamental way. This was not just a partnership anymore. This was something deeper, something that made his heart race and his palms sweat. Benjamin, she said quietly, I think I am starting to care about you in a way that goes beyond our practical arrangement. His breath caught. I have been feeling the same way. I did not know if I should say anything. I am glad you feel the same. She bit her lip again. But I am still not ready for everything that might entail. Is that all right? It is more than all right. We can take this as slowly as you need. He reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her pointed ear. I am not going anywhere, Varra. We have time. She leaned into his touch, and they stood there in the yard for a long moment, holding each other while the spring wind blew across the fields and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The trouble with the neighbors did not materialize in the way Benjamin had feared. A few people from Millbrook stopped trading with him, but others seemed curious rather than hostile. And eventually a few of the braver souls started visiting the farm to see the orc woman who had married Benjamin Barlow. Varra handled these visits with grace and dignity, offering fresh bread and stories about her scouting work, and slowly the tide of opinion began to shift. The real turning point came in early summer when a child from one of the neighboring farms went missing in the forest. The parents organized a search party, but after 2 days they had found no trace of the boy. Benjamin heard about it when he went into town for supplies, and he immediately rode back to tell Varra. Can you track a child through the forest? He asked. The boy has been missing for 2 days. His parents are desperate. Varra was already reaching for her hunting gear. If there is a trail, I can find it. Let us go. They rode to the neighboring farm, and the parents' faces went pale when they saw Varra. You brought an orc, the mother said, horror evident in her voice. I brought the best tracker in the territory, Benjamin corrected. Varra can find your son if anyone can. Please let her try. The parents exchanged desperate glances, and finally the father nodded. All right, anything to find Tommy. Varra dismounted and began examining the area where the boy had last been seen. She moved in widening circles, studying the ground with an intensity that reminded Benjamin of watching a hunting cat stalk prey. After about 20 minutes, she made a sound of satisfaction and stood up. He went northwest into the forest. There are small footprints here and broken branches at about the height a child would break them. She looked at the parents. He is alive. The tracks are clear, which means he was walking normally, not being dragged or carried. I can follow this. The search party followed Varra into the woods, and Benjamin watched in amazement as she tracked the child through terrain that looked completely unmarked to his eyes. She pointed out disturbed leaves, bent grass, places where small feet had slipped in mud. The trail led deeper into the forest, up a steep hillside and down into a rocky ravine. "There," Varra said suddenly, pointing ahead. "In that hollow tree." They found the boy huddled inside the hollow trunk of a massive oak, cold and hungry but otherwise unharmed. He had been chasing a rabbit and gotten turned around, then found the shelter when night fell and been too frightened to leave it. His mother burst into tears, and his father kept thanking Varra over and over while she looked flustered and unsure how to respond to such gratitude. The story spread quickly through the surrounding farms, and after that people stopped looking at Varra like she was a monster waiting to attack. She was the orc woman who had saved Tommy Brennan, and that counted for a lot more than old prejudices. Summer turned the farm into a place of abundance. The crops grew tall and healthy, the animals thrived, and Benjamin found himself happier than he could remember being in years. Varra bloomed under the sun and regular meals, her skin taking on a healthier tone, her smiles coming more frequently. They worked together seamlessly now, anticipating each other's needs, moving around each other in the house and barn with the ease of long practice. The physical distance between them had been gradually closing. Benjamin no longer woke to find Varra pressed against the far edge of the bed. Instead, she had migrated to the middle, and sometimes he woke with her head pillowed on his shoulder or his arm around her waist. He was careful never to push for more, letting her set the pace, but the tension was building between them like a gathering storm. It finally broke one evening in late July. They had spent the day bringing in the first wheat harvest, exhausting work that left them both covered in dust and chaff. They cleaned up and ate dinner, then sat on the porch watching the stars come out, passing a bottle of the blackberry wine Benjamin had been saving back and forth between them. "I have been thinking," Varra said, her voice slightly fuzzy from the wine, "about us, about this marriage." Benjamin's heart started pounding. "What about it? When we started, it was practical, a business arrangement, but it has become something else, has it not?" She turned to look at him, her amber eyes reflecting the lamplight from inside the house. "I care about you, Benjamin. More than I thought I could care about anyone. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way I have never experienced before." "I feel the same way," he admitted, setting down the wine bottle. "You are amazing, Varra. You are strong and smart and brave, and I wake up every day grateful that you appeared at my gate." "I want this to be a real marriage," she said quietly. "Not just in name and on paper, but in truth, if you want that too." He cupped her face in his hands, letting his thumbs trace the line of her jaw. "I want that more than I can say, but only if you are sure. I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am sure." She leaned forward and kissed him, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Benjamin kissed her back, pouring months of restrained longing into the contact. She tasted like blackberries and honey, and when she made a small sound of pleasure, he felt it all the way down to his bones. They eventually made their way upstairs to the loft, and Benjamin discovered that Varra was exactly as strong as she looked, and that orc women apparently had very firm ideas about what they wanted in the bedroom. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, sweat cooling on their skin, and Benjamin felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. "I love you," Varra said suddenly, her voice muffled against his chest. "I do not know when it happened, but I do. I love you, Benjamin Barlow." He tightened his arms around her. "I love you too, Varra Barlow, more than I thought I could love anyone." She tilted her head up to look at him, a smile playing at her lips. "Varra Barlow, I like the sound of that. It suits you. Kiss me again." He did, and they did not get much sleep that night. The rest of the summer and into the autumn, life took on a new richness. They were not just partners now, but truly married in every sense of the word. Varra started talking about wanting to expand the farm, maybe get some goats for cheese, plant a bigger vegetable garden. Benjamin found himself making plans that stretched years into the future, building a bigger barn, adding rooms to the house, creating something that could be passed down to children if they were lucky enough to have them. The harvest that year was the best Benjamin had ever brought in, and he knew it was because he had help, because Varra worked beside him with tireless strength and determination. They celebrated by going into Millbrook together, walking down the main street hand in hand while people stared and whispered, but no longer with open hostility. The town was learning to accept them, slowly but surely. Judge Bryce stopped them on the street, her sharp eyes taking in their clasped hands and the easy way they stood together. "You two seem to be doing well," she observed. "Better than well, Your Honor," Benjamin said. "We are doing wonderfully. Good. I admit I had my doubts when you first came to me, but I am pleased to see I was wrong." She nodded to Varra. "Welcome to the territory, Mrs. Barlow. I hope you find happiness here." "I already have," Varra replied, squeezing Benjamin's hand. Winter came early that year, blanketing the farm in snow by late October. Benjamin and Varra spent the long, dark months working on indoor projects, repairing tools, planning next year's crops, and spending countless hours talking about everything and nothing. They made love frequently, learning each other's bodies with the same dedication they had applied to learning each other's minds, and Benjamin thought that he had never been so consistently happy in his entire life. In early February, Varra missed her monthly courses. They waited another month to be sure, and then she confirmed what they had both begun to suspect. She was pregnant. They held each other in the kitchen and cried happy tears, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had created together. "A baby," Benjamin kept saying, unable to process it fully. "We are going to have a baby. You are going to be a father," Varra said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I hope the baby has your eyes. You have beautiful eyes. I hope the baby has your strength and your courage." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I hope the baby has the best of both of us." Spring came again, 1 full year after Varra had appeared at Benjamin's gate offering him salvation and finding it herself in return. They stood together in the field where he had been standing when he read the letter threatening to take his farm, and looked out at the land they had built together. "I was so desperate that day," Benjamin said quietly. "I thought my life was ending. I thought I was going to lose everything I had worked for." "I was desperate too," Varra replied, resting her hand on the barely there swell of her stomach. "I thought I would die alone in the wilderness, that I would never belong anywhere again. We saved each other. We did." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Thank you, Benjamin, for taking a chance on me, for seeing me as a person instead of a monster, for giving me a home and a family. Thank you for showing up at my gate, for being brave enough to ask for what you needed, for choosing to stay even when it would have been easier to leave." He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I cannot imagine my life without you now. Good, because you are stuck with me." She grinned up at him, her tusks catching the sunlight. "We have a farm to run and a baby to raise. You do not get to escape that easily." "I would not dream of it." They kissed there in the field, surrounded by the first green shoots of spring wheat, while somewhere in the distance a crow called and the wind carried the promise of warm days ahead. The farm that had almost been taken from Benjamin was now more secure than ever, not because of legal documents or homestead laws, but because it was filled with love and partnership, and the future they were building together. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Varra leaned her head on Benjamin's shoulder and said, Tell me again how we met." He wrapped his arm around her, smiling at the request she had been making more and more frequently as the reality of their happiness settled in. "You appeared at my gate on a cold March evening, looking fierce and frightened and determined all at once. You offered me a practical solution to an impossible problem, and I took a chance on a stranger because I was desperate. And then," she prompted, even though she knew the story by heart, "and then I fell in love with you slowly, day by day, moment by moment, until I could not imagine a single morning without waking up beside you. You became my partner, my best friend, my wife in truth as well as name. You gave me a future I had stopped believing in." "I like that story," Varra murmured, her hand finding his and threading their fingers together. "It is a good story." "It is our story," Benjamin corrected, "and it is still being written. Then let us make sure we write a happy ending. I think we already are." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, two unlikely souls who had found each other in desperation and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate pasts. The farm stretched out around them, solid and real, a testament to what could be created when people chose hope over prejudice, partnership over isolation, and love over fear. Benjamin thought about the letter he had burned in the fireplace months ago, the official seal that had threatened to take everything away, and he was grateful for that desperate moment because it had brought Varra into his life. Sometimes the best things came from the worst circumstances, and sometimes salvation arrived at your gate wearing a different face than you had expected. The important thing was being brave enough to open the gate and let it in.